The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson, and welcome to another edition of Ranger Retro with George Grimm. I'm Ralph Tycho of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it is my pleasure to turn it over to George.
Thank you, Ralph. Welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast. I'm your host, George Grimm, and I'm joined today by former Ranger goaltender Steve Baker and retired NYPD Detective Kevin Keuchler. And we're going to talk about the case of the missing goalie masks. Now, to give you a little bit of background, apparently quite a few years ago, the mask of Steve Baker, Gilles Gratton, Gary Simmons, Gilles Maloche, Ed Belfour, and John Garrett were loaned to Greg Harrison, who actually designed the masks, and they never got them back. So thereby hangs the tale, and I'm going to let Steve tell it. Take it away, Steve.
Well, thanks, George, for inviting us to kind of shed some light on this situation today. It's one that obviously cuts deep into my skin. I made that mask famous as a Ranger while I played there. The greatest moments of my life, obviously spent in New York as a hockey player. It was the Empire State Building mask. And to your point, the mask was actually created by Greg Harrison. And just to give you some background, back when I was playing as a kid, growing up in the Boston area, there was actually two or three big players in the space. There was Ernie Higgins in Boston that was making a lot of the masks, and I had two Higgins masks, one of which I wore initially when I joined the Rangers. And that one disappeared as well, quite frankly. And then, of course, Greg Harrison, that a lot of people know up in Toronto. I had four masks made by Greg over the course of time. Three of them, or actually three masks. Two of them were regular molded to your face, and one was a hybrid. I will tell you that none of them arrived on time, and that was pretty much Greg's MO because he was very talented in the space. He had a lot of people that were pressuring him for the goods, and just got himself, too heavily engaged with so many different projects that he could never get the mask out to us. But with that being said, he had produced the mask for me right around the same time that JD had actually secured his Lone Ranger mask that he wore for a very short time in New York.
Right.
And, back after I retired, and I did get finished with the Rangers in 83, and then I finished my career in 84. Sometime after that, I received a call from Greg Harrison, and Greg had asked me if he could borrow the mask, which was in my possession, which was the norm, right? The mask was made specifically to my face, and the guys would take the masks with them after their term was over with the teams or their career was over. And he wanted to put a exposition on for the Calgary Olympic Games of all the different masks that were made by him. And I said, you know what, that sounds like a great idea, Greg. I'm happy to do that. I sent the mask to Greg. They had the exhibit at the Calgary Olympic Games, and I guess it was such a great sensation and success that Greg called me shortly thereafter, and he said, Steve, this thing was just such a rocking success. They want to duplicate it at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. Do you mind if I route the mask to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto? And I said, you know what, that's fine. I would think that would be wonderful. And to my understanding, that mask was there up until this year, probably in the spring around March, when I found out that it was no longer there. So I'll pump the brakes there, and you can jump in, George.
Okay. How about Kevin? How have you been investigating this? Where it went, who might have it, where the finger pointing starts? Because I know we've talked about at least three suspects, and they're all pointing fingers to somebody else.
Yeah, that's correct. Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
When I jumped in with this and reached out to Steve and just offered, some help with this, because it really sounded like it was very confusing, so to speak, into where this thing could be, where the mask could be. And I'll use Steve's term, we poked a lot of tires. I think Steve always said we reached out to some people here and tried to figure out where it could possibly be at this time. That's the tricky part. We don't seem to know that part. We seem to know where it was. The paper trail we know. We know what hands touched it. Some very willing people reached out back to me after I contacted them. The last known person is a Mr. Barry Levine that we think either possibly has it or in turn, by what he told me through Messenger, through Facebook Messenger. He never did return a call to me, but he said he gave up the hobby, gave up the interest, and doesn't remember where he sold it to.
Right. Now, how about Greg Harrison?
Spoke to him a couple of times in the early stages. He was one of my first reach outs, along with Phil Pritchard from the Hall, and that was kind of a back and forth blame game. Well, so and so had it. No, he had it, and it went back and forth. And then I got some, a couple of stories about some masks that were left in trailers of a relative of Greg Harrison, and they were taken. They disappeared. Some molds were possibly made, and that's another thing that kind of came to a dead-end street, whether or not those molds were in turn going to end up back at the Hall.
Right.
So if maybe before we poked our heads into this, was there some more shenanigans that maybe were going to take place? Right.
Well, I think at one time Greg was telling us that, or you anyway, and you told me that the masks and the molds were stolen from under his porch. And, why would you keep stuff like that under your porch?
Yeah. Well, that changed. It ended up being they were in trailers. That was the second or third contact with him. It ended up being 2 50-foot trailers that disappeared. Where that went, I mean, that goes then going past that. You have Frank Savello, who Steve could comment more on him about his doings in the past, but it went from Frank Savello, on to Mr. Barry Levine. Right. And that was the, I don't know if Steve wants to just comment on Frank. Frank has a long history of being a collector. Right, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I got in touch with Frank Savello out of the blue. I'm in the Scottsdale, Arizona area now, and he called me back, I want to say back in 2018, and at that time he was heading up a memorabilia company up in Bolton, Ontario called the King of Ice Memorabilia. And, I had a bunch of stuff in bags that I'd been pulling around from place to place, and I said, I can part with this. I think it was a couple of pairs of skates and some Team USA Canada Cup 81 pants and a bunch of Ranger pants and just some other stuff that I shot off to him. And he ended up selling it at online auction. And, I kept poking him like, how we doing? Where'd you end up with this stuff? And come to find out, like 3 years later, he finally came across and told me, we sold that back about 3 years ago, and he still hadn't paid me yet. So I had to actually get a Toronto attorney involved and drop a letter on him, and then he kind of hopped to, and he was crying poor mouth. But, I mean, there's some people that are curators in Canada that are very well known, and I'm not going to drop names, that basically said he's a very bad guy, he's cheated everybody, and they just try to avoid him. I didn't know that. But, Frank has a history, and, I know that Keuch talked to him, and Frank said that he sold the mask to Levine, and but he couldn't remember where he got it from. Well, he had got it from Harrison because they're both there in Ontario, and Harrison's the one that actually, went to the Hall of Fame, went to Phil Pritchard, and, Phil was just coming on the job back in 2011, when this stuff was loaned to him. And I guess there was a history of Greg taking some of the stuff out to do photo shoots for, motion spots and things like that Greg was being paid for. And he's using other people's assets for it. And so Pritchard loaned it to him, and then these items never came back to Pritchard, never came back to the Hall of Fame. And so you've got that combination of Levine, you got Savello in there, you've got Harrison in there, and how all that came together and where it is now is a mystery. I think they moved my mask, Cooch. Didn't they say for $11,000-$12,000?
Yeah, I think that was the number.
Yeah, and not that the money's important. Not that the money's important, George. I mean, really, it's just I've got a young grandson now by the name of Duke that's a hockey crazy kid, and I'd love for him someday to go up to the Hockey Hall of Fame and see my mask up there. I mean, that's the one part of me that did make it, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It's not there anymore,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the only player that got his mask back that I know of is Gary Simmons. And he told me a wild story that he chased it back to Barry Levine, and Levine sent it back to him for nothing. But then Barry Levine supposedly bought it back off of Gary Simmons for $20,000. So there's a lot of money in those pieces of painted fiberglass, So
no question.
As far as the Hockey Hall of Fame is concerned, I had contacted them after I wrote a column that nobody wanted to publish because it was about the Hockey Hall of Fame. You don't piss off the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I had to get some kind of confirmation from the Hall of Fame. So their president got in touch with me, and he said that they were basically off the hook. That the masks were only loaned to them by Harrison. They never had really any kind of ownership of them. So if he wanted to take them back, he took them back, and that's where it stands now. So they kind of washed their hands of any kind of responsibility to it. And it is the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that's a national institution in Canada. You can't fight them. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. And listen, I mean, to follow that chain, and Cooch can jump in here from a legal perspective, but, in good faith, and times were different back then, right? Like, in good faith, I loaned it to Greg because it was my mask. The Rangers paid for it, but the guys kept it. Who else is going to wear my mask, right? It's my mask. And I loaned it to Greg in good faith, and it was in place, up through 2011. Until it got loaned out and didn't get returned. And Greg must have given them the mindset that, these are mine. They weren't his. They were loaned to him by the actual players.
Right.
And I'm not even sure that the other guys that you mentioned at the head of the show, George, even know, other than Gary Simmons, even know that their masks are gone and disappeared.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the legal angle, Cooch?
Well, the whole thing is just trying to find out the possession thing. It seems like there's 4 different set of hands, so to speak, that had their hands on this, or in fact have their hands on this. If its final destination is possibly Barry Levine, who, if he purchases this, not knowingly, that it's in fact stolen property or whatever, that's the end all right there. Is he went and he bought it. It's the beginning stages of this, starting with the actual loan from the Hall, to Greg for pictures, so to speak, or whatever went on there with what he was going to do with it. And then as it's in his possession, I don't know what he thinks or does, but it ends up going to Cervello. And that's where the fugaziness is. It's right there. It's between Harrison and Cervello, with, in fact, Pritchard not knowing, or is he knowing what's going on?
Yeah.
That's the very hard part. That's the hardest part, what we're trying to figure out right here. And to this day, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Right.
Well, it sounds like Levine has acknowledged as much that he purchased them, in that he dealt with Gary Simmons, that he purchased something that really was a hot item, if you will. and then he ended up, cutting a deal with Gary. That was the Cobra mask that everybody, of course, knows was so famous. But it sounds like he's basically acknowledged that he knows he bought hot goods. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
and that changed after he did, in fact. I don't know what the time frame that was with Gary's transaction going back and in fact paying him, but that's kind of when the messages ceased with me. And then I had to go and reach out to a couple other people, and Steve will tell you there's these sites on Facebook, these vintage mask sites, and there's some heavy duty hitters on there. The guys, there's collectors on there, there's buffs, there's historians, there's everybody. And I reached out to a few people on there. Some are angry because they know what's going on. They know that there's a search for this. And then you got to wonder too if there's some sort of unknowing guilt there. Does somebody know something that doesn't want to say anything to us?
Right. Yeah, they don't want to get themselves in trouble. As far as Frank Cervello, he does have a bad reputation. When I first got involved in this, I was talking to a friend of mine at the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now, this guy is a real Canadian gentleman, really nice, quiet guy. And I brought up the name Frank Cervello, and he started shouting at me, "Oh, he's a bad guy. You stay away from him." So, he's got this bad reputation. So, I just had to laugh at that. Okay, what about now? What's your next step? I mean, it would be nice if we could get someone like a heavy hitter involved, like a Rick or Westhead or somebody involved to do an investigation in this.
Yeah, he's in the Kyle Beach story right now, big time, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course he did the Joe Murphy story as well, as everybody knows, which was so well documented. But I'd love to have something like that happen, George.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any connections to touch off with him and, give him, the 411. We're kind of touching the third reel, as you said, because you don't want to put too much dirt at the Hockey Hall of Fame. But there's a lot of people, and I won't mention names, that, so they don't have the greatest trust, that aren't getting backdoored out of there periodically over the course of time. And
it's true. Because the Hall of Fame hires a lot of interns, and a lot of this stuff might not be cataloged, and somebody sees an opportunity to make some money. So it could happen with without any fault going to the Hall of Fame itself, but it could happen. You put people in contact with all this stuff that's very valuable. They're going to try to get their hands on it and sell it. It's just human nature. So
and it's such a large amount of it. I mean, there's other buildings that they have that house so much memorabilia, and there's probably some stuff that was done over the years, and as checks and balances, and as everything gets better with security and keeping track of things, it probably came to not a halt, but it slowed down, I'm sure. But we're going back now.
If they start using RFID tags or something, barcodes on the gear and stuff like that, then it's easier to track for sure.
Right. But this is going back to 2011.
Yeah, and way before, they have stuff from way before that, so.
Right. It's 10 plus years. It's it's a while ago.
Because at the Hall of Fame, I was at the Hall a few years ago, and they really don't have that much stuff out. They have a lot of displays, but they really don't have a lot of that stuff out, and so it's got to be somewhere. And
they have it in a resource center that they keep down the street from it. I think most of the stuff is stored there.
Yes, that's correct. That's where it is. I believe there's actually a couple of buildings, and some people I reached out to, did tell me that there's a warehouse full of of stuff that might not be of Hall of Fame value, but it gets sent up there and they're keeping it and it's stored in these warehouses.
Mm-hmm. You almost have to think that that's why a lot of these players are selling their collections to a place like Classic Auctions rather than give it to the Hall of Fame, because it would just get lost there. But if they sell it to an auction house, they can at least get some money out of it,
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
Okay.
Now, it's funny, that stuff that gave to Cervello that he sold online in the auction. I think it might have been Classic Auctions where it actually went. I had found out through somebody else that through Phil Pritchard actually that my stuff ended up back at the Hall of Fame, and the people that bought it. They said we gave it to the Hall of Fame specifically because they didn't have a lot of Ranger pants and memorabilia and stuff. So they gave the stuff directly to the Hall of Fame. They purchased it online and gave it to the Hall of Fame. So I don't know who's on first, what's on second. I don't know who's on third. It's just a lot of nefarious activity that's transpired here. And as I said to you guys, all I care about, I'd love to have the mask back in the Hall of Fame so I can bring my little grandson and my granddaughters up there to see it. And that's all I care about. I don't care about the money. I just like to have it back in place, guys.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, Steve, can I ask you what you were doing 40 years ago tomorrow?
Yeah, George, you brought that to my attention. I didn't realize it was 40 years.
Yeah, wow. 1981. I was at that game,
Yeah, Halloween night in Boston Garden. I had my whole family there. And it was about halfway through the second period. Tommy Fergus came down. And he was a left shot, cutting through the right face-off dot, moving to his left, and I was moving with him, and he let our shot go to my right. That was my stick side, and I did a split kick, which you don't see too much going on anymore in the game. But at any rate, I did a big split kick, and I ended up tearing my left groin. I ripped it right off the bone, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. That's the worst pain that I've ever felt in my life. And I remember Bubba Beck and Mike O'Connell, who was a friend of mine from the Bruins at the time, Boston guy that grew up, played high school hockey together. Those are the two guys that shepherded me off the ice. And it's a tough memory. My dad used to wear kind of a Tom Landry hat back in the day, and the team went out for the third period, and I'm sitting down there in the trainer's room in the locker room with ice bags on me and electric stim on me, laying there with a couple towels over me, and the old man came in the room and walked over to me and shook my hand, and I could just see a little tear come dripping down out of the corner of his eye. I just said, "Dad, I'm hurt bad. I'm hurt bad," and that was the beginning and the end of my career, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I remember that like it was yesterday. Also, incredible how you remember certain things.
This is Ralph here, and I've been listening to everything, and that last story brought a tear to my eye. So thank you for sharing, I guess. But there's no words that express condolences when you lose your career. And how old were you at the time?
It's a good question. I think I was around 25, 26, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That's incredibly sad. Adds to the sadness. That was my 2 cents. Sorry to interrupt you guys.
That's okay. All right. How about, do you have any memories of Rod Gilbert?
Well, I got a funny one. We're talking about my mask. You guys will get a grin out of this. The first time that I wore it, I wasn't playing, but I'm skating around in the pregame warm-up, and how you do the loops, right, in your own end. Yeah. And Rocky was doing some interviews at Iceside, which he used to do for Madison Square Garden back in the day. It was late 70s. And he calls me over. He says, Bixie, come over here. So I go skating over to him, and he looks at me. He says, Bixie, Steve Tabernac. He says, what is that thing on your mask, a phallic symbol or something? And I go, Rocky, it's the Empire State Building. He was the absolute best. He was the dean, and I know the garden. I haven't been there since he obviously departed and left us to this world, but I'm sure that the garden is just not the same without his presence on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah, what a gentleman. Man, oh, man.
I'm glad we had a chance to see him play anyway.
I ran into him in Midtown Manhattan one day. I pulled over while I was working in uniform, stepped out of the truck, and went right over to him. And he just stopped short. I came right over, big hand sandwich, half a hug. I said, I missed most of your career. I told him at the time I was, 49 or whatever. I said, I just started really following it the year after you retired. But I said, I've seen plenty of your highlights. And he was in no rush. We chatted for a few minutes, and off he went.
Yeah, very, very warm, very genuine.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Shame.
Now that's the thing about hockey players. They're all very nice people, and they will go out of their way for you, including you, Steve. They're all very
I appreciate that, George.
So.
That's the truth.
All right, so I hope this shed some light on your situation. I'll send the link to you when it's posted, and you can post it, and I'll post it, and hopefully somebody of some kind of influence will hear it, and we'll make something happen.
Yeah, we can only hope. I think we're down on it now, Cooch, wouldn't you say? I mean, we've kind of hit all angles, and right now we just need to have a lucky play out of left field that slides in and gives us some intel that might lead us in the right direction.
Yeah, you said it, Bakes. We need a little ring of that doorbell and something good to be on the other side. And
yeah.
I still say I'm optimistic. I still say something's gonna pop. We're monitoring the sites. I mean, I look at Messenger. I look to see if he's active, and I send him a little something. I'm talking about, Mr. Levine. I try and send something to him just to see if something comes to light. But there's word that he's possibly out of the country, and that's not going to help us really too about time frames and everything when you can reach him. But looking for that lucky break is right. We're hoping.
Yeah, just if I could. George, I just want to throw one thing out, and it's kind of a plug for, you were talking about good people in the world and hockey players and that. There's also other good people, like a gentleman by the name of Greg Bray, who's in upstate New York, and he's kind of one of those guys, one of these mask guys that had said to me, Steve, I think there's something nefarious that transpired with your mask, and got me looking into it. But in retrospect, he went, my daughter was a nurse, so she helped me actually do a mold of my face. Of course, it's a lot chubbier than it was back in the day, but did an actual mold, and Greg went and actually did 2 replicas of my mask, and one of which I now have in my possession, and he gave another one for me to give to my grandson, Duke. So there's some wonderful people in the world, George, and Greg Bray is certainly one of those people, so I wanted to give him a little shout-out.
Good.
That's good stuff.
That's good, Steve. Okay. All right, you guys got anything else for me?
No, 3 Ice. Watch it come June of 2022.
Yeah, we'll have you on in the spring when it comes closer to 3 Ice coming back. Okay,
Sounds
Steve?
Great. Yeah, we're gonna bookend it. We're gonna start it in Las Vegas, and we're gonna end it with the championships in Las Vegas. So we got lots to talk about, George.
Yeah, all right, in the spring. Okay. I thank you guys for coming on. It was good. I enjoyed it. I hope we did some good. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, George. Thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen. A Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you again for being here, George, and your wonderful guests.
All right, Ralph. Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Thanks, guys.
And
Take
happy
care.
trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.